This is a 25-minute presentation on pert and Gantt charts, split into three sections for viewing in bite-sized chunks. Presentation 1 primarily covers the pert chart introduction. Presentation 2 covers the remaining pert chart topics, and Presentation 3 primarily covers Gantt charts. Please view them in order. I hope you enjoy them, though perhaps we should just hope for basic comprehension and not for actual enjoyment. This is an introduction to two techniques that are useful for production management. One is the program evaluation and review technique, usually abbreviated just as PERT. PERT charts are useful primarily in the planning and organizing phases of a project. The technique was developed by Booz Allen Hamilton as part of a U.S. Navy contract in 1958. It uses task times and dependencies to determine the sequence of tasks that control how long the entire project will take. This is termed the critical path of the project. This also shows us where we might place additional resources to reduce the overall project elapsed time. The other technique is the use of Gantt charts to indicate the progress of a project. These bar charts are useful primarily in the leading and controlling phases of a project. They are termed Gantt charts after Henry Gantt, who was one of the early users of the technique around 1910. They show the planned schedule of the tasks for the project, as well as showing the progress to date. The purpose of a PERT chart is to determine the overall project cumulative elapsed time and to determine ways to allocate resources in order to reduce that project cumulative elapsed time. The first thing that is required is a list of tasks, their execution times, and their dependencies. The dependencies of a task are the previous tasks that must be completed before the subject task can begin. For instance, for the final assembly of a bicycle, we may need 4 items: a frame, handlebars, a seat, and 2 wheels. These 4 items are the dependencies to the assemble the bicycle task. The execution time for the bicycle assembly task might be around 0.75 hours. This information is summarized in the diagram. The next step might be painting, labeling, testing, who knows. The first step in the PERT process is to develop a list of tasks. Included in the table should be a task identification, the task execution time, and a list of the task dependencies, those other tasks that must be completed before this one can start. Second step, from the table with task identifiers and dependencies, generate a topological diagram showing the dependencies beginning at the left and moving forward in time to the right. Step 3, add the task execution times to the topological project diagram. Step 4, determine the project cumulative elapsed times after each of the tasks. Step 5, identify the project's critical path. This is the series of tasks that has the longest cumulative elapsed time. Step 6, identify ways to reduce the total project cumulative elapsed time by adding or moving resources. Here is step 1 in the PERT process. The task table includes the task identification, its dependencies, and the task execution times, the amount of time it will take to complete the task once it is started. In this case, the time unit is days. To develop this table requires knowledge of the particular product and manufacturing process, whether it be airplane manufacturing, automobile manufacturing, or shoe repair. I don't have the expertise in any of these areas, so I'll use some generic tasks A, B, C, and so on. In this case, the first task is A, which has no dependencies and which requires 2 days to complete after it has started. tasks B, C, and D all depend on A and require 4, 6, and 5 days to execute respectively. Task E requires tasks C and D to be complete before it can start and will take 3 days to execute once it has started. Task F has a single dependency, task B, and requires 4 days to execute. Task G has 2 dependencies, tasks E and F, and takes 2 days to execute. To finish requires task G to be complete, and there is no additional execution to be performed. This shows a topological diagram of the tasks to complete the project. In reality, for a project of any size, just arranging the task blocks so there are not too many crossover lines is a bit of a challenge. First, we can show the starting point. Call it Start. Next, look at the tasks table. Task A has no dependencies, so can start anytime. Tasks B, C, and D all depend on A, so we can add those arrows. Task E depends on both C and D, so there are 2 dependency arrows coming into task E. Task F depends only on task B. Task G depends on both tasks E and F, so gets 2 dependency arrows coming into it. Completion of the project depends only on G, so we can add an arrow from task G to End. This is the start of the PERT chart, showing the dependencies in diagram form. The next step is to add the task execution times. We could have added the task execution times as we were developing this dependency diagram, but for this introductory explanation, I thought we would keep the 2 items separate. We can read the task execution times from the tasks table. Task A takes 2 days, so it gets a 2, and so forth until we've added all the task execution timing information to the PERT chart. So far, all we've done is to transfer task identifications, execution times, and dependency information from the task tables to a diagram. One of the challenging parts of this in a real project is getting nice topological layout so there are not too many crossing lines. For our small project, this has not been a real consideration. Next, we are going to calculate the project cumulative elapsed times from the task start times and execution times.